Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of the Lean Body Podcast, GA Lean Body Podcast for GA players. I'm your host, Brian Keane, sports nutritionist and strength and conditioning coach, here to help you with all things GA related fitness. So today's episode is another Q&A. So the March Q&A questions this month have come in through a combination of email, for those of you who are on my GA email list, and some through Instagram. Follow me on Instagram, Brian_Keane_fitness. So we will jump straight into the first question for today's podcast. So first question comes in from Ushin. Hey Brian, I have a question. I'm 17 years old and play Gaelic and rugby a lot, and a lot of my sources say that you shouldn't be deadlifting. What's your opinion on this? So this is a brilliant question that I'm going to give context for younger players, but I'm going to expand on it for anybody that's playing GA or any sport that is sprint specific or performance specific. So rugby, basketball, soccer, there's a lot of crossover in terms of the twists and turns, even though they're obviously different skill related sports. In terms of the fitness and the overall capacity in order to twist, turn, be strong, be fit, be fast, there's a lot of crossover. Deadlifting is one of those highly contentious points when it comes to fitness professionals. And I can see the argument on both sides. Some coaches will tell you that every single program that you ever design should have deadlifting in it because it's a move that generates power. It's a multi-joint compound lift, so you're working large muscle groups in your body. If you're able to pull weight from the ground and you're doing it in an effective way with good form, you can potentially improve your speed, your strength, your power with one particular movement pattern. Squat and deadlifts, they tend to be the foundational plan of some strength and conditioning style programs for good reason. They're very good bang for your buck movements, very similar to Olympic lifts, that there's a huge bang for your buck if you can execute them perfectly. And I've done a podcast in the past and I've been slightly misquoted a little bit on this one when it comes to Olympic lifts, when I talk about Olympic lifts on, say, Instagram or on Q&As with my GEA players, because I'm not a fan of Olympic lifts for GEA players because of the amount of time it takes to execute them perfectly, that you could be spending that time doing something else that would give you a more fundamental return on investment in terms of your time. So a basic squat or a basic deadlift takes less time to execute perfectly than, say, a power clean or an overhead snatch. Fantastic moves for generating power for athletes, but has such a steep learning curve and can take 6, 12, 18 months to potentially perfect, and you need to design an entire program around it. I have a little bit of I don't know if it's worth the time, energy, and effort for the return that you will get. That being said, if you're able to execute those movements perfectly, Olympic lifts in particular, they're incredible movement patterns, very similar to squats and deadlifts. I love both of those movements, but a deadlift tends to be on the higher risk of injury spectrum, and that's where people fall on the other side. So I've spoken about the coaches who think that every program should have some form of deadlift in it, but there's other coaches who are on the other side, that the risk to reward is so high in the sense that, or low, whatever way you want to word it, when it comes to deadlifts, that it may not be worth including in your plan, because if you get injured, then you can't train at all. And if you get injured, then you can't play games, you can't improve your skill set, you can't work on anything outside of potentially recovering and improving your mindset from injury recovery. You can't actually do any physical exercise if you hurt your back or hurt your hamstring or hurt your glute from incorrect form on a deadlift. And the problem with a deadlift is it's a very easy movement to perform with bad form, mixed in with you can go quite heavy and move the weight, but massively compromise the actual form of the movement. And that can lead to kind of a false sense of security in some players, that because you've moved a massive amount of weight, let's say you go in and deadlift 100 kilo your PB or 140 your PB, your 1 rep max, and you're like, yeah, I feel amazing, I'm super strong. And then you try and go back and do that a couple of weeks later and your body's like, no. And something snaps and something pulls. And a deadlift is one of those movements that it's very easy to pull because you don't actually have to complete the rep to pull a muscle. And what I mean by that is, generally, if you're doing a bench press, the worst case scenario, not always, but generally when it comes to athletes, the worst case scenario is if you don't have a spotter, your spotter is going to have to grab the bar because your muscle will just fatigue. Similar to a squat, you won't be able to get down. You'll put the bar on the rack or put the bar on your shoulders, you'll rack it, and you'll know, nope, there's no way I'm getting back up at this weight. So you have a direct and very fast impact cue or feedback cue that this isn't going to move. So a spotter will have to help you on a bench, or you'll just re-rack the weight with a squat. Whereas on a deadlift, it doesn't have that feedback instantly because you can get it partly off the ground, something can pull, and then you end up dropping it. That's not to say you can't get injured with those other movements. Of course you can if you're doing poor form, too much weight, etc. It's just that the risk is higher with the deadlift. So I can understand why some coaches, some trainers are very mindful of putting it into programs, because at the end of the day, you're playing a sport where your performance matters the most. And if the movement patterns you're doing in the gym or the exercise choices that you're doing or performing aren't improving your game, or they are potentially improving your strength or your speed or your power, but coming at a high risk of potential injury, they're generally not worth the trade-off. So what I would say is, I think context matters. When I used to work as a one-to-one personal trainer, I was a big fan of deadlifting with my players because I could make sure that the movement was executed perfectly. And some basic form tips for deadlifts is that you're leaning back into the bar, you're sitting as if you were sitting down, so if you let go of the weight you'd nearly fall over. You're sitting back as if you were sitting into a chair, and you're keeping the bar very close to your body. You're pulling through your lower body, pulling through your feet. You're keeping the form, you're up and keeping your shoulders back at the top. You're not rounding through your back, and then you're either dropping the weight or dropping it down slowly based on whatever your program is designed. I had no problem back in 2014, 2015 when I was working one-to-one with players, either in clubs or one-to-one in the gym, because I was overlooking that movement and I could see if form was breaking. So I didn't mind it then, but I don't do deadlifts in my GA Lean Body program. Now there's a trap bar deadlift on the phase 2 of my program. So the way the GA Lean Body program works is it's a full season program. So the first phase 1, the first 6 weeks is changing body composition, getting you faster, getting you fitter, getting you stronger, potentially building muscle or losing body fat based on your secondary goals. And then phase 2 has a little bit more of an S&C element. So multi-dynamic movement patterns, trap bar deadlifts, front squats, movements that are a little bit harder to execute but has longer rest periods so that you can perfect them. But the program is designed that way intentionally. And I use a trap bar deadlift in there is because it's harder to do a trap bar deadlifting correctly. It reduces your risk of injury, and truthfully a trap bar deadlift is closer to a squat than a traditional deadlift, even though you are going to get some of the deadlift component because you're picking a weight from the ground and you're bringing it up into an upright position. But I like that movement because it's controlled. You're not going to increase your risk of injury. So when it comes to deadlifting in general, you have to ask yourself, are you willing to pay the cost? Are you willing to pay the price? I think if you have a history of training and you can execute a deadlift with absolutely perfect form, you know what your limits are, you know when you're pushing it too far, you know when your back is starting to round when you're moving the weight, and you have a good self-awareness around your body and a long history of training, then I'm like, conclude them in your program. They're great. They're fantastic. They're an amazing movement. But if you don't hit all of those things, and for someone that's 17, 18, 19, that even if you started training at 13, you still only have a few years of training experience, I would be mindful of those. And how I would probably approach deadlifting if it was me, Oisin, is I would potentially work with a coach, work with a trainer, someone in the gym, someone that knows how to execute that movement perfectly, and I would design it and start it and consider improving your form in a time of season when it doesn't impact your performance negatively, i.e. the off season, where you're going to have more leeway with what you want to do and you can go and focus on other potential goals. And that's when I would do it. Like deadlifting in the best case scenario of perfect form can absolutely ruin your body coming into games and championships and even a thick and hard, fast league season where games are coming thick and fast, because the recovery is so it takes a long time to recover from a strength-based deadlift workout. Like if you do a hard deadlifting session or even a few sets, 3, 4, 5 sets of deadlifts, like you could be 10 days recovering from that workout because it's so intense on your body, and you have to be mindful that that can negatively impact your performance on the pitch. So that's another reason why I probably would never include deadlifting in a mid-season plan for that reason. It's just the recovery is too high. Like the recovery takes too long, and it's just too high a risk, even outside of the risk of injury, that potential risk to performance being impacted because you're fatigued, because that multi-joint compound lift is so difficult to recover from. Squats are very similar as well, but more so a deadlift. And anyone that's ever done a hard, difficult 5x5 or a strength-based deadlift workout know exactly what I'm talking about here. Like you could be a week, 10 days, even up to 2 weeks at points recovering from that workout just because it breaks down your body so much. So when it comes to deadlifts, there's a lot of things to consider, and hopefully that helps anybody that is wondering if they should or shouldn't include it in their program. Next question comes in from Adam. Hey Brian, I'm currently trying to bulk as much as possible before the oncoming season, which involves me doing gym 5 to 6 times a week. I'm also trying to get fit by doing approximately 3 runs a week. Do you think runs and gym sessions should be done on separate days, or is it okay to go to the gym and then go for a run later in the day, or vice versa? So there's a lot of context needed here when it comes to individualized training programs and what's going to be the best and what's going to be the worst. Now, what I'd say here is the context of your gym plan matters greatly. Like if you're in the gym for 20, 30 minutes doing, a little bit of S&C work, strength and conditioning, or hypertrophy work, or whatever it is that you're doing in terms of, trying to bulk up, probably a mixture of strength, maybe with some hypertrophy work in there. If you're doing that for 20, 30 minutes, your runs aren't going to take that much out of your body. But if you're training for an hour and you're doing an hour of strength work, an hour of hypertrophy, and doing an intense session, trying to squeeze in a run after that might not be an ideal way to approach your training. So what I'd say here is it depends. So when you're trying to bulk up, your primary goals have to be here, your nutrition and your overall training in the sense of your gym, your resistance training, because that's what's going to bulk you up. Your runs aren't going to bulk you up. So you need to make that the primary focus if the goal is bulking up. So that what that looks like in terms of overall nutrition is a calorie surplus. So making sure that you're eating enough calories, ideally good complex carbohydrates, oats, sweet potatoes, rice, etc. Complete protein sources, meat, fish, eggs, healthy fats, avocado, oils, nut butters, etc. All of these things would make up the bulk, hopefully, of your nutritional plan, and you're in a surplus, which is going to potentially allow you to bulk up. And then your gym-based training is going to be either a mixture of strength and hypertrophy, or either strength or hypertrophy. You can potentially bulk up on both. It's kind of a genetic factor at that point. Some people can get really big doing a strength program, so 3, 4, 5 reps on compound lifts, so military press, bench press, squat, deadlift, etc. But not everybody. Most people that struggle, and if you're a hard gainer or someone that struggles to put on size, you're probably going to have to include some hypertrophy in there as well, which is your bodybuilding parameters, your 8 to 10 reps, 3 to 4 sets, 60 to 90 seconds reps. You're probably going to have to include a combination of both in there in order to build up and bulk and get size. And then obviously you're hitting your minimum protein requirements. Again, your building blocks, your protein, your amino acids are the building blocks of muscle. Like you have to hit that target to build muscle or to bulk up. It's like the analogy I use, if you're not hitting your protein requirements, it's like trying to build a traditional house without any blocks. It's like you could use some twigs and use some wood and stuff. I'm like, but it's significantly harder. If you're trying to build a traditional house, I'm like, you need blocks. You need the building blocks of your house, and your protein are your building blocks of your muscle. So look at that, look at your nutrition. When it comes into your runs and how to pair them then, it really depends. So one of the things I do, and I'm doing this in my upcoming GE Alien Body program as well, and we did this in the last one as well just because of the lockdown and the restrictions, is we're doing the gym or the home-based workout, either the weight program or the bodyweight S&C program I created mixed in with the running program. So the running program in the GE Alien Body plan as well. So you can do that independently. But what a lot of my players are doing, because it works quite well, is they're doing either the weighted home workouts first and then they're doing the running program after. They combine together. So the whole session takes about 60 minutes, about 30 minutes on the workouts or 40 minutes, and then the runs take between 20 and 30 minutes based on variations of tempos, based on variations of distance, etc. So that's what's working for a lot of those players. And what you'd be doing here, Adam, is your gym workouts would need to reflect that, in the sense that if you want to do them on separate days because that's working better for you, then that's what you do. If you want to combine them and pair them together, and that's what's working better for you, then that's what you do. If you want to do them on the same day, where you do the gym in the morning or workout in the morning and then a run in the evening, or flip that, then that's what you do. It's very much a case of, what are your primary goals, and is your training, and I've already spoken on nutrition, but in this case, is your training reflecting the end goal? So for example, if you're trying to improve your running fitness and you're really trying to get that up, you're probably going to want to do it at a time when you're feeling fresher, i.e. oppose at a different time of the day to your main workout, or on an alternative day. So on what would have been potentially a rest day, you do your runs instead. So if the performance element of your run is your focus, you want to set up a scenario where you're feeling fresher so that you can focus on the intensity in those runs. If you're just doing it as kind of a layer on top of trying to bulk up because you really want to bulk up ahead of the new season, then it doesn't really matter when you do it. If you want to do it after your workout, then you do it after. What I would say here is, you got to get clear, Adam, and this is the advice for anybody listening, on what are your primary goals, what are your secondary goals, and even what are your third related goals maybe in this context. So are you trying to bulk up? Are you trying to get stronger? Are you trying to get fitter faster? Are you trying to keep your running intensity higher, keep your running aerobic fitness up, so that when the new season returns and you're back into full swing, you already have that basic base built, so that you're not going to struggle with any of the endurance element of your runs when you go back to the new season, or when you go back training in full. So you have to get clear first, because your training program and your nutritional plan will always reverse engineer what you're trying to achieve. So the answer, do you think runs and a gym session should be done together on separate days, or vice versa, depends on your primary goals, mixed in with what works best for you. Some people have a schedule where they can't split it. Some people have a schedule where it's way better to split it. They can't combine everything together. They'd rather do 2 25, 30-minute sessions at opposite ends of the day, because that's what works for them. So there's an element of what can you do consistently as well. And there's always the best practice. What would be the best? That depends on the primary goal, mixed with what can you stick to over the long term and be consistent with, mapped to your end goal. So you're combining those two things. So the long and the short of that is, it depends. Depends on your primary goal, mixed in with what works best for you. So have a think on that, and realize that, yes, there's different things that will work better. As I said, if you want to improve your runs, you're going to do it when you're fresher to optimize the performance in that particular type of workout. But if you're not too fussed on it and you're just trying to have a minimum effective dose on running to stay on top of it, then it really doesn't matter when you do it. Okay, next question comes in from Shane. Brian, if you improve speed, will this increase fitness if you include maintenance work as well as have a higher anaerobic speed reserve? So for anyone unfamiliar with anaerobic speed reserve, so it's like typically defined as like the difference between, say, maximal speed and, say, running speed at VO2 max. So the main studies that I've ever seen on this are normally in cyclists. So it's like the anaerobic power. It's a tricky one to kind of break down, in the sense that it's defined as like the difference between maximal sprint power output and, say, power output at VO2 max. You don't really need to know any of that. And when it comes to Shane, in terms of this context of improving speed, will this increase fitness if you include maintenance work as well? The answer is it depends. And what I'd say here is focusing on the metrics, and even using language like anaerobic speed reserve, unless you're getting tested in a lab, isn't always the most useful way to approach your training. Now, again, if you're kind of similar to me, where you kind of geek out on the science, then by all means use the language. But when you're trying to improve speed, it's a different approach to trying to improve overall fitness. But it's very similar to trying to bulk up and build strength. So I'll use that example and then I'll tie it back to speed and fitness. So when you're trying to bulk up and build strength, you can follow a strength-based program, as I talked about earlier, or you can follow a hypertrophy-based program that I talked about earlier. So strength-based, lower reps, longer rest, moving a heavy weight. Most strength-based programs are designed around that. Hypertrophy then is kind of a bodybuilding style program where you're tearing down muscle fibers, and as a result, you're repairing back with amino acids, the rest are recovering, you're building those muscles back bigger, potentially. But most gym programs, or most programs where you're, say, lifting weights, even if you're focusing on hypertrophy, building muscle, you're still going to improve strength, and vice versa. If you're on a strength program, you're probably still going to build a little bit of muscle, even though your primary goal is strength. So it's not a case that they're not in isolation. It's not that you do one and you get building muscle, but you don't get any stronger, or you get stronger and you don't build any muscle. Most will have a combination of both. And in trying to improve your speed and also increase your fitness levels is very similar. That when you're following a speed-based program, so whatever it is that you're doing for that, traditional speed-based programs are normally glute-based work, so maybe over-speed training where, you're running downhill. Some people like even running uphills for muscular endurance and then doing the sprint downhills. You're doing variations of sprint-based training where, you're leaning forward on your toes and off your sprint. You're doing various distance, so 20 meters, 50 meters, 100 meters. You've designed a program that's specifically around speed. And then increasing fitness would be slightly different. So again, it also depends on what fitness means here. I assume you mean just basic aerobic fitness for where you're able to get through a game and not be, dying by the end of it. Again, it really varies person to person. It's a very subjective term in terms of, i.e., quote unquote, fitness. What I say here is it's the same thing. When you're following a program that's designed around speed, you're going to get a little bit fitter as well. The same way as if you're doing a program where you're getting fitter, there's a good chance you're going to improve speed slightly as well, especially if it's like a run-based program or a program that's designed around the primary movement pattern of your sport. So, GA's case, it's running. You're twisting, you're turning, you're running, you're sprinting. It's effectively the movement patterns. Of course, there's others, jumping, catching, etc. But in terms of the primary movement patterns, they're the primary movement patterns. And what happens there is if you're following, say, a 5K plan with varying speeds and tempos, you're probably going to improve your speed there, either because you're just basically getting your body more prepared to run, and as a result, varying up those distances and varying up that movement pattern with different speeds can potentially improve your speed, but also by doing lots of runs. And players get this when they do like 3-kilometer programs or 5-kilometer programs, and then they try and sprint and they're like, actually I'm a better sprinter now. I'm like, well, that's because your aerobic fitness is better. I'm like, your body's better delivering oxygen to the muscles. I'm like, that's just your fitness that's improved, and as a result it's giving you the impression that your speed is improved as well. And by all intents and purposes, if you measured that metric, it probably has, but not because you did direct speed work. It was because you improved your overall fitness and your body's ability to give, blood to the muscle, your body's ability to recover, your lung capacity. All of these things matter, and vice versa, as I said, with your speed. So what I would say here is if you're looking to improve speed, I would design a program that's specific to that on the things I mentioned earlier, and realize that you will increase fitness with that, especially if you include some maintenance work. And one of the analogies I've used on this podcast in the past, and I talk a lot of this with my GA lean body players, is maintenance is so much easier than building. And that goes for absolutely every single goal you have in GA. Maintaining muscle while getting stronger, fitter, and faster is way easier than trying to build muscle and get stronger, leaner, and faster. Same as, trying to improve your speed is so much easier or trying to maintain your speed is so much easier if you're trying to get stronger than trying to build your speed and improve your strength at the same time, because you're hitting multiple goals, and it's a case that it's not impossible. Of course you can hit multiple goals. The whole GA Lean Body program is designed around that, and lots of other coaches will tell you similar things. You can hit multiple goals. It's just a case your program needs to be specific for that. So it's easier to bulk up. It's easier to lose body fat by itself. It's easier to build strength by itself. It's easier to get faster by itself, because you're only trying to hit one goal. That's why sprinters get faster. That's why powerlifters get stronger. That's why bodybuilders get bigger, because they're really only focused on primarily one goal. But when you're trying to do multiple things at once, you need to have a program that's designed to do multiple things at once. So if you're trying to get stronger, you're trying to get faster, if you're trying to build muscle, if you're trying to get leaner, you're trying to hit all these goals, you can, but your nutrition, your training, your recovery, your supplementation, all of that needs to funnel towards that specific goal. So what I'd say here, Shane, is to improve your speed, you'll be able to increase your fitness with that purely by doing the speed work. But if you're including some form of maintenance work with it, you're definitely going to be able to stay on top of that, because maintenance is so much easier, and then trying to hit another goal and just maintain with the minimum effective dose on whatever it is you're doing. So in terms of your runs, say you're trying to maintain your 3-kilometer speed, or you're trying to maintain a certain tempo on a 5-kilometer run, or whatever it is, it's not going to be too much stress in your body to maintain that, because you've been doing it. You have muscle memory, you have a routine, you know exactly how to time it. There's all these tangible and intangible potential benefits that will allow you to maintain and keep whatever you have, and then go after this other goal over here. One of the examples I use is myself, in the sense that I do ultra marathons now and triathlon, so Ironman triathlon, 100-mile ultra marathons, but I still have a bodybuilder build. I'm like, it's because I bodybuilded for years and I did strength and conditioning for years. So just because now I'm, doing 60, 70, 80, 100 kilometer runs every week, I don't lose that much muscle because it's there. I'm maintaining it. I'm spending 20, 30 minutes every day doing a hypertrophy session, and it maintains all that muscle, maintains that strength. And then I'm able to do my runs on the other side, as opposed to trying to build muscle, stay lean, and then do my runs on top of it. It would have been too many things at once. So I'm probably a good example from that side. And I know it's a different example to what you've said here, Shane, but I think it ties it all together in terms of how to approach your training, how to look at things. So I know that maintaining a goal is significantly, or maintaining whatever goal or target you have, and then building on a new goal like improving speed is significantly easier than trying to hit multiple new goals at once. Next question, last question, comes in from Fenton. Hey Brian, I was wondering what's your take on lean bulking, and wondering if it will slow me down or affect my performance. So I'm not going to rehash other things that I've covered on the podcast in the past. I would highly recommend anybody that's looking to build muscle and get faster, probably go back and listen to episode 1. I think it's episode 1 of the GA Lean Body podcast, but I've covered this a few times, but I will retouch on it a few points. Yes, so lean bulking and trying to bulk up, not dissimilar to what I talked about earlier in Adam's question about bulking up in the oncoming season. That's largely down to your nutrition. That's going to play a huge role in your body's ability to either bulk or lean bulk. The only difference between a bulk and a lean bulk is either the calorie intake is slightly lower because you're trying to increase muscle or increase lean muscle tissue without increasing body fat. So it means you go into a slight surplus, enough that you're fueling your body and giving it what it needs to grow, but not enough that it's spilling over into excess calories, which spills over into excess fat. That's the only kind of major difference. Where bulking, you'd probably go a little higher. You would add size, but you'd also increase body fat. Generally, there's two approaches to this. One is that you're a lot more strict with your actual caloric intake. The other is that you make cleaner food choices and keep your body nicely fueled. Also something I touched on earlier. And bulking won't slow you down or affect your performance on the pitch in a negative way unless you do it incorrectly. If you do it incorrectly, it 100% will. If you bulk up to the point that you add way too much excess fat, then it's just physics 101. If you were 60 kilos or 70 kilos running around the pitch really lean and really quick and, able to move very easily, and now you're 85 kilos because you did a massive bulk, you're probably going to be slower, especially if it's all body fat, because you're trying to move more weight. It's just physics. You're trying to move more weight, and especially body fat, which just isn't very effective for transitioning onto a pitch for the most part, even if you want to be the bear in the square. It's not an ideal performance or athletic, wouldn't be a recommendation from my side, but you're trying to move more weight. So to do that at the same speed, unless you've replaced that weight with muscle in a program designed to improve your speed and performance, you're going to be slower. So that's one way you can get slower. The other is the training element. So if you build muscle or you build size in the incorrect ways, it can also slow you down. So for example, in that first episode of the podcast, I talked about my example when I was playing GEA, and this is probably one of the reasons why I get to work with so many people now, and I'm an effective coach, because I see the mistakes early because I made them myself. Was you're doing bodybuilding style movement patterns or one plane of motion movement patterns in hypertrophy parameters without any compensatory work that's going to potentially impact your performance in a positive way. And what I mean by that is you're doing, say, squats, 3 sets, 10 reps, 69-second reps, all well and good, and then you do your entire program like that, leg extensions, leg press, lunges, etc., all very bodybuilding based. And then you go out onto the pitch and you try and twist and you try and turn and you try and have a sharp movement pattern, and your body just won't do it because it's been primed and loaded, and you've increased your training load, your volume, your weight, i.e. you're moving more weight in one plane of motion, and then you're trying to take your body out onto a pitch and turn quickly, sharply, and you haven't done any of those movements in the gym. And that can potentially slow you down, and even worse, potentially increase your risk of injury. Why a lot of players can have issues with knees, IT bands, glutes, hamstrings, etc., is doing incorrect gym-based work and then going out onto the pitch and never recreating those movement patterns, and your body has been increased, or has recently, if you've been doing a 6 or 8 or 12 week program, increased its load. So your muscles are a little bit fatigued anyway, and then you try and twist sharply and then something snaps or pulls. So you have to keep that in mind as well. And again, there's the other element that if you injure something, you twist an ankle, you injure your hamstring, your glute, your knee, like that's going to slow you down as well. And it's kind of it can be something that's unseen or unspoken, that you've been doing a load of gym work, trying to get stronger, trying to get bigger, and then you actually went over on your ankle or twisted your knee, and now that made you slower, but it was because you didn't have a good or well-designed gym program to help you and support you and improve your performance, and as a result now you're carrying a niggling injury which is impacting your speed. So there's actually 3 areas to look at when it comes to slowing down. It's your weight, as I said, excess weight, going from 60-70 kilos to 85 kilos of body fat, and physics 101 of trying to move more weight. The other is building movements in a plane of motion that is potentially not going to translate onto the pitch and can slow you down, slow down your reactions, slow down your body's ability to perform the way you want, and then the increased risk of injury where you're carrying a niggle because of that, and that can impact your speed as well. So there's a few things to look at. What I'd say when it comes to lean bulking, look at your nutrition first, but also look at your training. Realize that you'll only slow down if you have an incorrect training program or an incorrect nutritional plan that's not in alignment with improving performance, improving strength as you bulk up. So you can do that yourself. You can work with a coach like me, my GA Lean Body program. You can work with loads of other coaches out there who will do something similar, or you can design your own program, design your own plan. Just make sure that it's specific towards improving performance as you're bulking up as well. Have your hypertrophy element in there. Focus on your compound lifts, have your strength work in there, focus on your calorie intake, hit your protein requirements, but then have your S&C, have your strength and conditioning style movements, your unilateral movements, your higher intensity rep range, your plyometric based work, your box jumps, your clapping push-ups, all of these movement patterns that can potentially improve your performance and keep your body as a machine that doesn't break when you go out onto a pitch. But also give that first episode a listen. Scroll down, you can listen to that anywhere, Stitcher, Spotify, iTunes. It's also on the website now. All the episodes of the GA Lean Body podcast are on my website as well, briankeenfitness.com, so you can check them out on there. So hopefully that helps, Fintan. So that's everything from the March 30th, 2021 podcast. Hopefully this helped. Thanks so much to Oisin, Adam, Shane and Fintan for the questions. Hopefully you all got loads from this. For more information, obviously on my upcoming GA Lean Body program, I'll pop that in the link in the description below. Pop your email in there if you want more details. That's everything from this month's podcast. Catch you all next month.